Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the February 10th, 2015 meeting of the Mississippi PowerShell User Group. Tonight we have Adam Bertram, also known as Adam the Automator, presenting on managing software with PowerShell. So whenever you're ready, Adam, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. As Ron said, I'll be presenting automating software installs with PowerShell tonight. So the reason I chose this topic was it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'm a System Center config manager guy. I've been that way for about 5 years or so as one of my clients, and it's just something that I do every day. And I guess if you want to call it a PowerShell niche, that's kind of my PowerShell niche. So first up, who am I? I'm a senior Microsoft Systems consultant. I work for a company called Illustrator in southern Indiana. I've been with the same client, fortunately, for about 5 years or so. During that time, I do lots and lots of PowerShell. I've been doing PowerShell for, I don't know, off and on 3 or 4 years or so. And I also do, as I said, System Center, SCCM, and more recently, Operations Manager, so I'm a big System Center proponent. As Ron said, I blog at the adamtheautomator.com. I try to put a blog post up there every, I don't know, week or two, just to kind of tips from the trade, see what I can manage to muster there. I have a couple courses for Pluralsight, and I also do I also have a single course for Udemy, if anybody's familiar with that. My Pluralsight courses are on PowerShell and SCCM, if you can manage that. Freelance writer. I do a lot of writing for like Tom's IT Pro, MCP Mag, there's a few other places, so I kind of do that. And I'm an avid Twitterer at AD Bertram, so if you want to get a hold of me anytime, Twitter's probably the best place to do that. Just to give you some history on where this topic is coming from. Like I said, I struggle with software installs and software deployments with SCCM in particular every day. And every time an application owner would come to me and say, hey, I need this application pushed out to, 5, 10, 5,000 machines. Here's the installer. Go make it silent and just make it automatic across all the machines. You do that enough times. I've done hundreds of software deployments, and I'd say after about the 50th time of doing the same thing over and over and over again, I decided this is ridiculous. I'm just going to automate the crap out of this to make sure that I don't have to do all this stuff over and over again. I was noticing I was doing the same general things every time. So if you've ever done software deployments, you'll know that every one of them is not straightforward. You can't just do MSI exec, the MSI / QN for a quiet and it works. 9 times out of 10, there's always something else you have to do, and it makes it even harder if you have to do an upgrade or you have to uninstall an application at the same time. So there's a few things that I struggle with. Adding and changing registry keys after the install. You would get a registry key, they would say change HKLM software, whatever vendor, that sort of thing. And my favorite, an key current user registry hive. So they say, well, here's a registry file. These registry entries need to be changed across the user. Well, if you're familiar with that, the SCCM especially uses the local system account to deploy the software. If I run it as a local system, I don't have HKCU hive for every user, so that was another reason I automated that. Copying files. Here's another one, the requirement: ensure software XYZ isn't running before installing. So sometimes you have when you're doing a software upgrade on a piece of software, the vendor says, well, you have to make sure that the old software is stopped first. I was constantly having to put in manual stop process. Even when I was just started out, automated this in PowerShell, I would constantly be doing, stop process, the old process, and getting all that done. Now that's all automated. Another one, to create a shortcut to the software after the install was done. That's another one where I would have to loop through all the user profiles and put a desktop shortcut on all the user desktops, and it was just a pain. So all that's automated. Import certificates, and so on and so on. And this is just an example of everything that some examples of software vendors, installers that I've had to deal with as an SCCM guy. There's the big ones: Windows Installer, InstallShield. I've done some that were packaged with Advanced Installer, Make MSI, the Nullsoft one, and each one of these has their individual little nuances. Some of them have a switch that does this, some have the same switch name, but it does something completely different. It was driving me nuts. I was constantly having to reinvent the wheel. This is a typical process for a software deployment that I would go through. I would manually install the software, figure out all the prompts, next sort of thing, just do some discovery work. Then I figure out how to make it silent, figure out all the switches. Well, is the switch /S? Is it /Q? Is it /silent? You never really know, if depending on what the installer type is. You run the install, test the installer with the app owner. So you go over to the app owner and say, here, I installed this silently on this one machine. Check it out, make sure it's all working, all good, and all that sort of thing. And finally, getting a little facetious here, write a script to account for the 1,521 extra things. As I said, almost always the app owner will come to me and say, well, this is nice, but I needed to copy these files down, or I needed to update this configuration, or I needed to do, whatever. I took all these processes that the app owners were constantly telling me about, and I would just, instead of reinventing the wheel every time, doing it again and again and again, I just slowly kept putting these processes in a PowerShell module I'll show you later. And here is the typical process that I do now with PowerShell. With SCCM in particular, which you could really do this with any product, I've developed a PowerShell module which I include with all of the software deployments that I do. So just a simple matter of import module and then the module name, and at that point I have all the functions available to me to automate whatever I need to do. So just a quick example, I gather all the steps from the app owner just like I did before, manually install it just to make sure it works. Install-software is a function that I have in the module. And really, I try to make it as generic as possible. You'll see in the demo in a minute that install-software is the one module that kind of feeds off, or the one function that kind of feeds off all the other functions. And finally, test the install with the app owner to make sure they're happy. You don't want them unhappy on one whenever you push it out to 100 and it bombs. Here's a example of kind of the evolution of what I went through. That monstrosity on the left is a VB script. I believe that was like 300 or 400 something lines. That was for the Citrix receiver client. With that one in particular, which that was the worst one I've ever had to do, but it's definitely not uncommon. The application would be pushed out, would be just installed with a /S switch, or just to make it silent, just the default installs. But then they would come back and say, well, this setting in here wasn't applied right. Well, how do you do that? Well, the vendor then say, well, you need to change this registry, this one. And a lot of that is just looping through the profiles too. So a lot of this stuff, they don't offer system level changes. So I have to do user. A lot of these desktops that I deploy to have, 1, 10. I've got some of them with 30 or 40 profiles on it because they're shared computers, but you can't make system level changes, so you have to loop through every single user profile and make sure the changes on every single one of them. That was a lot of that code there. It was a monstrosity. Now with PowerShell, this Citrix one is about, I think it's like 20 or 30 lines, so it's decreased the time tremendously. And over time, I went from VB script over to PowerShell. I started with PowerShell about 2 years ago, automating these software deployments, and started on the module I'll be showing you in a minute about a year and a half ago. And the process is very iterative the way I built this. I would come across something that I had to do manually that didn't fit within the confines of the module. So I would figure out a way to automate it, make a generic function. That way I can just do install software instead of, MSI exec/exe/I, whatever, all that third thing. If there's an error, fix it. And as I mentioned, if it's not included, if the automation piece of it is not included in the module, I would add it in there. So this is just an evolution that I'm constantly going through every single deployment. Can I automate it? No. If not, then I let it go. If I can, then I'll just roll it back in there. And finally, here's a demo of just an example of what I do with the PowerShell module. Let's see. All right. Can everybody see that okay? Mike? Ron?
Yeah, it looks good
Yep.
to me.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, just make sure I didn't need to zoom in or something. Okay, so this is this software install manager.psm1. This is the PowerShell module that I include with every deployment. And I'm not going to go through every single function, but here it is over here. It's got many different regions, many of the common functions that you would run through. So just a real quick example. Let's see some good ones here. Get my registry value. Sure, I can just do a get item or get item property in this, but I don't even want to worry about the exact syntax. I want to make it as simple as possible. So for example, just with this one, get my registry value, the path and the name. I don't have to worry about the nuances with this get item or get item property. I tried to make a standard method that I could do a lot of this stuff in. Get installed software and registry. Here's the install software one. Some of these are really big. It's all the parameters in here. I try to make these functions as generic as possible, just so they would fit in the majority of cases. And like I said, I would probably bore you to tears going over each of these functions. I'll show you how to get a hold of this later, but this includes pretty much every process that I've ever had to go through in the past 2 years on just fixing all the little nuances with all these different pieces of software. So this is what that is. So in the demo here, I'm going to load this in, and then I'll just show you briefly some of the functions here. I probably showed you a lot of them before. Compare file path. Here's the detection ones. So some of these are detection functions that I use. After the install is done, I want to make sure that it installed rather than relying on an exit code, for example. So I would do a compare. Well, did on the compare file and compare folder path there, what I would do is I would just say, okay, I'm pretty anal about some of this stuff. You can see copy file with hash check. Like what that one does, I make a file copy from a folder in my package directory to the client. I want to make damn sure that it is the exact same file. So I'll do the copy, then immediately after the copy is done, I'll do a hash check against the source and the destination to make sure they're the same. So whenever you're deploying to 5,000 machines at once, just a margin of error, just 5% or something. I mean, what's 5% of 5,000? I don't know. Just a few dozen machines. That's going to cause a few dozen users problems if you screw it up. So all this stuff, I'm really anal about making sure I do everything exactly right, because when you're deploying to that many machines, you make one mistake, it's just multiplied by however many machines you push it to. Here's the get installed software in the registry function. This one I just wanted to show you. We'll be deploying the Adobe Reader on this machine, and this function here, the get installed software registry, it goes through the registry here. Let me quickly show you that to you. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but This one essentially just takes all the standard registry keys that the software gets installed to, loops through all of them, and this one actually was a little bit fancier than what I usually do. I added wildcard values in there, so you can see that, you know, I can do Adobe Star here, or, you know, I could do the name, or I can do the publisher. Just a real quick way to query software on the machine. So let me show you, just so I'm not, you know, think I'm blowing smoke or something. This machine is just a fresh VM, so there's not a whole lot of stuff on it. But you can see if I just do get installed software and registry with no parameters, I get, you know, every piece of software that's installed in here with the display version, the publisher, and all the pertinent information that you're going to need. So now that you see that there's nothing on this machine, I have a install PS1 here. This is another file that I also include in the package directory when I deploy software, which you can also do here. So let me show you that real quick. Oh. So this is a typical package directory that you can use in SCCM, Altiris, or you can use a poor man's software deployment. You can just use PowerShell and remoting if you wanted to. But this is a typical thing. You know, you have all the installer files, the MSI. This one has an MSP and an MST file in it. And I include all these standard installer files, and I always include my install.ps1. It's always called install.ps1. And my module directory, or my module here, I actually keep that on a network drive. I don't like the dependency on the network while I'm doing it, but I didn't want to include the PSM1 file in every one of my deployments here, because if I update it, I update it constantly. So if I ever update it, I have to update every one of these copies inside of every software package. So on production, I'm referencing this on a UNC path. But this is the standard lines. I use this one here to reference the files. You see down here in the current directory. Experience has told me I can never use /. I can never use just the name. Sometimes it'll work. It just depends on the instance that it's in. So I always use this. Especially this instead of like PS script root, for example, because I have a lot of XP machines out there, unfortunately. So I deploy to PowerShell v2, v3, v4. It kind of goes, it kind of runs the gamut. So I have to code pretty much for v2. I have to code down all the way to v2. So a lot of the code, if you download this and take a look at some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff is, well, I just noticed that right there. That's kind of a problem with V2. Anyway, a lot of this code is for V2 because it still has to run on XP. So if you do try this and you have some XP machines in your environment, 9 times out of 10, chances are it will work in V2. But it's a ton of code here, and it's just me playing with this in my spare time. So there's definitely some bugs. It'd be nice if I can get some help and maybe people contribute on the GitHub repo that I'll show you a little bit later. But anyway, start log. I'll show you the log that it generates. This creates the log file before it starts. Feeds the parameters to the install software commandlet here. And you can see that it's just a simple example of just to specify the installer path. Here's my MSI. Here's my MSP. Here's my MST. Instead of figuring out, well, was the syntax, was it MSI exec /I, and was it patch equals, what were the parameters there? I was tired of just having to Google that every single time, so it's just a simple matter of install-software, have a standard set of parameters here. And this one of these parameters is kill process. This is for upgrades. So let's say if you deploy deploy this Adobe Reader 11, and in an environment where I have about 6,000 machines that I deploy to, and out of 6,000 machines, you'll have Adobe Reader maybe a dozen different versions out there of all shapes and sizes. So what this kill process is, this will say, I don't care what version it is, if it's the version that's running acrobat.com or it's the version that's running acroread32. What this parameter here will do is it'll go through and kill every single process that matches these before the install starts. So it's just another automated way to say, just be 100% sure this install is going to work. And finally, just the meat and potatoes here, install software in the params. I'm just using splatting here. So I'm just going to run this, and I'll show you the results. This will just take about a minute here to let this go through. Okay, and depending on the function, the majority of them will return Boolean true or Boolean false. Just a very simple, did it work or did it not? So in the console, it'll just say true or false. But if you want to dig in farther, it's also in the log. So let me show you that here. So let's go back to my demo, and let's check the registry again, and I'll see how it was installed. So it shows the display name, the display version, and the publisher there. So you'll see that it wasn't installed. I ran it, and then it was installed. So this is all pulled dynamically from the registry. Next, I want to show you the log that it generates. As a SCCM guy, even if you're not an SCCM guy, I highly recommend you get this CM Trace utility. It is a great log viewer. So the way I have the logs created for me, because I use CM Trace, is I can go here and it can go through every single process that just happened in that install PS1. So it says, beginning software install, killing existing processes. That's that kill process parameter I told you about. It will tell you almost everything that ran. So here is the actual command line that it ran. You can see that I did qin transforms equals, then the MST patch equals blah blah blah. I suppress a reboot, all users one, the LVX, and the log. I can't remember this exact syntax every time. And you can see, instead of doing all this right here, I don't know how many characters that is, all I had to do was just this. So it simplifies things dramatically. That's going down through the log here, and you can see I also do a lot of process management. If you're new to software installs, if you're new to doing hundreds of different software installs with hundreds of different vendors, some of these things, the processes get crazy. MSI exec will kick off here, which may kick off a batch file, which may kick off another batch file, which may kick off something else. It's a nightmare. So there's a few process functions inside of the module you can use to manage a lot of that. So let's see here. Let me show you a good one here. So no, I can't just simply use wait process or even the wait parameter on the stop process commandlet. I had to create my own. And what this does is this actually waits for a process that I feed it, and it waits for all the processes children before releasing control. So what I was finding was, sure, the initial MSI exec would stop, and then the whole script would keep going, but it wasn't actually done yet because it had spawned maybe 3 or 4 different child processes. So what this function here does says, don't wait for the children, the parent, and just wait for everything until you're just completely done. I have a few things in here to where I have a timeout. That was another, forget the timeout, and then some of the software installs, they would just run and run and run and run and run and run perpetually. So this function here was definitely a work in progress over many months of just trials and tribulations of, oh, this didn't work, oh crap, now I have to fix this, now I have to fix that sort of thing. So that's one example of a PowerShell function that came out of my pain and agony. Let me go back to the log here. And there's really not much else in this one that's particularly interesting. No, there's really not a whole lot that's interesting in this one. Some of these you'll see, multiple. You see how many lines did this one do? I don't know. There's really not that many. This is a tiny log. This software install was well behaved. You'll get some of these that, like did what I said. They'll spawn 3 or 4 different child processes. They'll, gosh, I can't even recall all the different things they do. I've seen some of these to where just to get the install done is 3 or 4 times this length. And again, it's all about automating everything. Like if something doesn't work on a lot of these functions, if the initial thing that I'm trying to do doesn't work, I'll just try again. I'll have 1, 2, 3 different things I try just to get it done, because like I said, if you're going to make a mistake on 5,000 machines, that's 5,000 people that are going to have a problem with it. And let me go show you what actually went down in this one. In this one, we're just simply using the install-software. This was just a clean install. I wasn't anticipating an upgrade other than this kill process. So this is a very simple one. Some of these can get pretty complex. So let me just show you that install software function here that I used. Where's it at? Software management. Yep. Okay. So in this instance, I used the MSI, MSP, and MST. And this install software, I may want to add that this does not only Windows installers, but it also does InstallShield and a lot of different other ones like that. So if I go here and just show you the parameters, I got the InstallShield, which if you're familiar, the InstallShield, to do it silently, you have to record an answer file to get things done there. So InstallShield, other installer path, that's for the one-offs that didn't really have a specific function. ISS, that's for InstallShield. Then you get all the MSI installer stuff in here. And here's a good one. Kill process and kill process during install. Your first process ones. Well, the reason was because kill process during install was an instance to where the software installer would start. It would then spawn a child process that somehow, from what I remember, it got disconnected from the parent. I can't remember how it worked, but it was a process of this process would hang the whole thing during the install, and after it was killed, then the install would proceed. So this right here, this is one of those, if you don't know the history behind things, you're like, why did he make a kill process and a kill process during an install? So that's kind of the history behind some of this stuff. A lot of other stuff is pretty self-explanatory. Require free space. Don't install unless there's XYZ amount of space on there. So going down through here, see if there's anything fairly interesting that you may want to learn about. As I said here, this is just going down through, figuring out, okay, you specified the InstallShield parameters, or you specified the Windows install parameters. Here it's creating those strings. Eventually, I was going to roll this into something like OneGet, or just query the Windows installer API directly, but I haven't quite got to that point. So right now, it's just building the install strings for each installer. So here you see that transforms equals. If I specified an MST path, here add the transforms. I specified an MSP, add the patch. That sort of thing. And if it's InstallShield, if it's another installer, here's the InstallShield. You can see it requires quite a bit of extra parameters, the -S, the -F1 with the silent ISS file. With InstallShield, you do F2 to specify the log file, and then SMS, that's another helpful switch. And there's the kill process before it starts. If you specify kill process in the parameters, it'll go down through, and you can see here again, I'm not just using stop process. Why? Because I don't remember, but I'm sure there was an instance to where stop process did not work for me, and I had to add additional functionality in there. Let me just quickly look at that one. So stop my process. Oh, yeah, this one was because I couldn't provide the level of logging. So instead of just doing stop process and feeding in an array in the name, I would just go through a for each loop and do every single one of them that way. That way I have a little bit more control. I broke up a lot of this stuff to have a lot more control than what you normally would with just stop process. So a lot of these functions are stop my process. It has the my in front, so that's kind of my custom way of doing things. And process timeout. There's the kill process during install. Yeah, nothing here. Okay. Yeah, that's about it as far as install software. I mean, you can, if you want, I'm open to any questions you can ask now or ask later about a lot of this stuff. I know I might be just boring you to tears with going through the little nuances and everything, but I'm going to go on for now. And finally, just wanted to show you a few other quick things. Git shortcut is another good one. A lot of these instances where you had during a software upgrade, somebody would say, well, users would call into the help desk the day after and say, well, my icon's not working. They don't know the program was upgraded, all they know is an icon on a desktop. So we run into the problems to where the user were just clicking on the old icon, and they also had the new icon, but they were used to the old one. So this was a function that was born out of that requirement, where we, after every upgrade, I would go through and say, well, remove all the old icons. I would have to do that manually every single time. Now I can just do git shortcut, give me the target path, XYZ old software. Yes, sir.
Tracy had a question in the chat room. It says, okay, if you just want to apply a map, how would you do that with your module?
Just want to apply a map?
MSP. Okay, I'm sorry, a patch.
Oh, an MSP? An MST?
P.
I have never actually had a reason to do that. That would probably, you could do that easily with a modification. I do software deployment, so all the time it's just a matter of installing the MSI with the MST. But if she needs that,
I'm sorry, he was asking about an MSP patch.
Oh, okay. It's just the same general function then. So, I mean, if you need that functionality, I would be more than willing to add that in here. I'm sure there's times when I would need it eventually, but at the current iteration, it won't just do an MST or even an MSP. You have to do an MSI with it, but that's something that could easily be rolled into here in in a few minutes. All right, and then finally, just one more. This is a big one that I constantly ran into. The vendor gives you a registry key, and it's HKey current user. Well, you have 50 users, or 50 profiles on a machine. Then, I can't just I can't get to HKey current user. I'm going to have to log in as each person, or what's going to go on here. This function here was born out of that. So I just wanted to give you a real quick final example on that one. I have HKey current user here, software impug, and I have a little find me key that says I need changed. If I run this, and I go back here and refresh, are changed. And it didn't just change it on this one. This actually went through every one of the profiles. Some of them, I believe this one actually loads, unloads every profile on this machine, as well as the current user, so it grabs every single profile. So that way you don't have to worry about, well, I fixed it for this user, but it still broke for this user, and I fixed it for this one, still broke for that one, that sort of thing. So really, that's about all I got. I could go on for probably for hours and hours and hours about all the little functions, but I know a lot of this stuff is going to be stuff that I needed that other people may not necessarily need. But does anybody else have any questions at all?
I know you mentioned something earlier. Can we get this from GitHub or somewhere?
Oh yeah, I forgot the rest of my little thing here. There we go. GitHub download and contribute. This is a GitHub repo that I have it. It's always updated, so the latest and greatest stuff here is on the GitHub repo. So definitely download it, tweak it, fix it however you need in your environment, and let me know if you do, because I'd be interested to see how other people would use it to their advantage as well.
If anybody's got any questions, you can type them in, or if you'd like to unmute, you can unmute and ask it.
Yeah, if there's a function you need, or
Hey Adam, this is Daryl Harrington. How are you?
Hello. Oh, pretty good.
Hey, great work you've done on this. It's pretty awesome. I'm kind of curious. I've been using DSC to do software deployments, and it's been a little challenging, to say the least. And I feel a lot of your pain points trying to figure out all the arguments and everything. But I've been able to make majority of it work. There's some that you just come across where the arguments really create havoc, and you have to find pretty interesting ways to make those work. I'm kind of curious what your thought around utilizing DSC for something like this. Do you have any intentions on kind of trying to transferring this over into some sort of DSC configuration?
I've briefly played with DSC and the software install piece of it, but the reason that I haven't, to be completely honest with you, I started with this process years ago before DSC was really a thing, and I kind of started with it, and I kept going to move all this functionality into DSC would require quite a bit of work. I mean, I'm sure it'd be worthwhile, but I don't know. Another reason why I really like control, over this. If I depend on DSC to do it, I'm sure it could, but like I said, I'm not real familiar with how to do software installs with DSC. I've kind of had I don't want to say, well, I've always done it that way, so no, I'm never going to do it with DSC. I hate the people that say that, but yeah, it's one thing I just really haven't ever seriously looked into using DSC with this.
Okay, no, that's a fair answer. Just curious. Another question I had for you: how do you? I mean, with 2,950 lines of code here, how are you keeping track? You mentioned that you're utilizing version 2 all the way down to version 2. How are you keeping track of some of the commandlets and so forth that are being deprecated, that, okay, now here comes a new version, oh, that commandlet's been deprecated, oh, that's going to break everything, and how are you keeping track of that kind of stuff?
Well, it's nothing fancy at this point. Every time an application owner brings me a new app, I have a VM test environment where I have XP with V2, I have 7 with V3, and I have 7 with V4. I go through, I write it in V2, on the XP machine, so I have to make sure everything will work in V2 at least, and then I'll just go up to V3, up to V4, and kind of go up that way to make sure it all works. So if there was a time when if a commandlet was deprecated in V2, for example, I would figure it out because I would write it in V2, it would work, and then I'd step up to V3 or V4, and it would break, and then I would just fix the module again.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that info.
Yep.
And we had another question from Tracy. Said, do you normally deploy it via remote, or do you run most installs locally?
With SCCM, I can't get on and show you the SCCM piece of it, but with SCCM, you can roll up a package. So like I showed you earlier, it's all in here. So this is my typical package directory, and at least in SCCM, I have my install PS1 and all my little installer files that go along with it to whatever I'm going to do. And with SCCM, you copy this. The SCCM process itself copies this whole folder down to the local machines. So let's say I'm going to push out to 100 machines. It'll download 100 copies of this package, and then it'll all run locally at that time under local system. So I don't have to do, I don't have to use PS remoting or anything like that. It just, the whole SCCM process handles copying it down and run the execution locally. Oh yeah, to install the uninstall stuff. That's a fun one too.
I'm curious to know if you've tested OneGet.
Yeah, I've looked at it, and I've actually talked with Garrett. Is that his name?
Yes.
Fear of the Cowboy guy. Yeah, I've talked to him on Skype about rolling this functionality into OneGet, and he was very perceptive of that, but it's just a time thing with me. I just didn't have the time to do that. That would be something where I would love to have, some help with the community on that to, get something like that started, but I just haven't had time to do anything like that yet.
And for those of you who don't know what OneGet is, it's some new functionality in the preview version of PowerShell version 5 that allows you to install software from places like Chocolatey, and actually you can install from MSIs and different things, and you can push it out to remote machines.
Yep, it's very, very similar to this, if not pretty much exactly the same. This really does overlap a lot with OneGet.
Yeah, you can actually spin up your own internal NuGet repository and create your own internal packages, because in a corporate world, for the most part, they're not going to let you pull stuff down from a public repository that somebody else created, but you could create your own internal one. And there's one called ProGet that's pretty easy to get set up, and you can install with it.
Yep, that would be. That's an alternative to SCCM for smaller businesses could use just a OneGet repository instead of the whole SCCM infrastructure.
Yeah, I played around with ProGet, got it installed, and I ran into a few problems trying to get some of the packages to deploy properly, but it is pretty cool stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing that mature a bit.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody who's in the chat is going to be at the PowerShell Summit North America in April, but I'm going to be doing a session on PowerShell Get and distributing PowerShell modules at the PowerShell Summit.
Yeah, well, I'll see you there, Mike. I'm going this year.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll be there too. Looking forward to it again.
Ron's presenting 2 sessions on access control list, and I think he's got one that's doing that stuff with DSC, and maybe one that's not. He can probably tell you about it more.
Yeah, it's one part, just managing stuff from the command line, and then the second part will be managing access control from DSC. So,
well, that's cool.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't have a whole lot of time to do, to look at the fun stuff, especially DSC, since I have to worry about all these damn XP clients out there. My hands are tied on a lot of things.
You sound like me. I'm unlucky enough to have PowerShell version 2, 3, and 4 in production right now at the same time.
Yep, so do I. So you know my pain.
But luckily, it's generally, I'm more or less on server side, and it'll be groups of servers that maybe, like we're getting rid of our terminal servers, and we're going VDI, but the terminal servers are 2003, and of course they're PowerShell version 2. But then maybe our backup servers, for example, we use Dell Aperture, and we have PowerShell version 4 on those. So at least if I know that I'm writing something for like Aperture, I can take advantage of the PowerShell version 4 features. But if I'm writing it for terminal server, then I need to make sure it's compatible with version 2.
Yep. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't really do. I have to write everything for V2 because I never know what the software is going to go into. Luckily, there's only, I think there's only 300 or 400 XP machines left. They're slowly getting rid of those things. I cannot wait until I can just stop writing for V2. It drives me nuts.
Yep, definitely. We probably have a few XP clients still hanging around, but for the most part, we're actually rolling out. I know the location I work at, we're rolling out Windows 8.1. So of course you've got PowerShell version 4 there on VDI, and we're lucky enough to be able to enable PowerShell remoting on everything. So that's like the best case,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't even got the approval. I've been wanting to just put a GPO out there and enable remoting on everything, but I haven't got permission to do that quite yet. It's kind of an ad hoc basis. I'll just, enable it if I need it on something, and then I'll just casually forget about it. So I don't know how many I've just one-offs I've enabled it on and not really told anybody about.
Yeah, the good thing about VDI, what we did, we just enabled it on the base image, so that way any machine that's created from that base image has it enabled.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yep, that'd be good. You got lucky. You're just deal with servers and clients.
But I enjoyed your presentation, and it's I probably have some use for this, because kind of like you said, for if you have some machines with PowerShell version 2 or 3 that can't be upgraded, then you don't have a choice. You can't, as far as I know, you can't use any of these newer technologies.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing that this module was born into. It's made to run, be as robust and versatile as possible to work on 2, 3, and 4. And then I think if just going down through it, and I've been in the weeds with it for so long, but just going over this presentation and just kind of showing somebody else how it works, I see a lot of those things in there and like, well, why did I do that? But I can't remember why I did it at the time, because it was probably some little situation that required some kind of manual intervention that I got tired of, and I decided to automate it. So the good thing about this module is it's tested significantly. So I've used this for it's probably 50 different pieces of software now. So that's one good thing about it. If it's pretty reliable. If I haven't had any problems with it in a while, but like I said, there's always some little thing in every deployment that's a little bit different. So I just tweak it a little bit more.
Yeah, and unfortunately, PowerShell version 2 is going to hang around for a while, because although XP is not supported anymore, and 2003 will expire in July, version 2 is the most current version you can run on Vista for anybody who's unfortunate enough to be running Windows Vista.
That's one thing I do not have. There's not a single Vista machine on my client's network, so I got lucky there.
And 2000, at least with if you do have any 2008 non-R2 servers, you can put version 3 on those, and then everything newer than that, you can put version 4 on.
Yeah, I think if I pull up the SCCM console, I think there is the client really doesn't do a whole lot of standardization, unfortunately. So there's, gosh, XP7. I think I have every single OS. I believe there's still a few 2000 servers. There's one NT server in there, so I have everything covered from NT server all the way up to 2012 R2, and then XP all the way up to Windows 8.1 on the client side.
Wow. And I'm actually in the process of getting rid of our 2003 servers, like I was saying. We had like 6 terminal servers at our main data center, and I got rid of 4 of those in the last week or two. So we have a couple still running. We're going to be getting rid of those, and I think we have a file and print server that's still running in 2003, and we've already bought all the licensing and all that sort of stuff and all the hardware, and we're implementing everything. And then I know I have one 2003 machine in another data center. But everything other than that is 2008 or better.
No, that's nice. Like, I think there's the client that I'm working for. It's less than 10 2000 servers. There's still 120 something 03 servers, and then goes up from there. I mean, they have 700 servers, so it's just a tiny IT staff, so they are definitely slow to get things migrated.
Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, I think that's it for tonight. And Ron recorded it, so it normally takes us about a week to get the recording edited and published. We'll try to publish it on next Tuesday on the user group website. I don't know if you can or not, but if you wouldn't mind providing a copy of your slides, even if you want to print them out to PDF or something, that way if somebody wants the slides, for some reason, for your contact info and so on,
Okay, I can do that.
And then I think that's, the code, they can get it from GitHub, so we'll link to that. We won't need a copy of the code.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of little intricate stuff in there. I sometimes have a problem stopping from geeking out on some of the stuff that I've done, but yeah, if you have, just download it from GitHub, and then if you have any questions at all, just ask me. I can modify it if it's not going to take too long, like the MSP thing. Or if you're familiar enough on how to do it yourself, just, give a pull request to me. I'll accept it, and you can contribute to it yourself.
All right.
Okay,
well, sounds good. So do you have anything else, Mike?
Oh, I was just going to say thank you, for taking the time to present for us.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Gives me some practice. I'll be presenting at Tech Mentor in August, so on this similar thing, so I have to get all the practice I can.
All right, well, thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully we'll see you next month. So have a good night.